Hey everybody, we are in Module 10 and I can feel like we are in Module 10 because it feels like we are now all at the mid-semester point. I'm sure some of you are feeling that as well. I decided to switch up my environment today and bring it into my dining room because the weather is beautiful outside as I'm recording this, and my office doesn't have any windows, so I wanted to be able to see some sunshine today. So I hope everybody is doing okay and that you're pushing through this semester. I know that stress levels are high. We get to the midpoint, and that's when you start to reflect on your grade and how you're doing in the class. I think everybody is progressing pretty well. I'm trying to get things graded as quickly as I possibly can. Although it does take some time to get through those videos. I did want to start out by just kind of mentioning where you are in terms of the videos that you're doing and sending and submitting to me in the associated papers. So as we have been leading up into this point with the videos, and I'm trying to think of which one it would be due next. I guess we'd be on video 3 that's due next, right? You guys are doing really well. Part of what you're doing within those videos are providing me with a view into your use of certain techniques. And so some of the techniques that we have been focused on up until this point are like the person-centered techniques and some psychoanalytic stuff and Gestalt and Adlerian therapy and theory. So, those are a little bit more covert if I'm watching them, not as concrete of techniques that are being used within those theoretical approaches. So when we are getting into these final videos that you're recording for me, I do want to start seeing a little bit more of how you're using these actual techniques and theories, okay? Because again, I'm wanting you to try these out, get a sense and a feel for what theoretical approach fits you the best, right? Because you're going to be the one using these down the road as a future counselor, so you need to test them out here, test them out with a mock client, make the mistakes as you're going through and doing some of these techniques, as you're using scaling, as you're using worksheets, as you're using mindfulness-based techniques, or whatever it is that you decide to test out that day. Try it out, record it, make the mistakes, reflect on it. That's what I want to see. I want to see some application of the theoretical approach. Part of what the paper provides me, and if you again look closely at the rubric, that last little section, the last criteria for the rubric has to do with the paper itself. And so part of what I want you to do is just briefly talk about what you went over in the actual role play. But remember that I'm watching it, and so I don't need a play-by-play. Also, if it ends up being more than a page, it ends up being more than a page. It's not that big of a deal. But so what I really want you to focus on is kind of the last piece. I want you to start being really critical of what you were able to accomplish in that session. Part of these role plays involves you doing some homework prior to preparing for the role play. That's what you're going to do in real life. You're not going to have clients just streaming in and you're like, oh, I didn't even look at our file from last week. I have no idea what I'm doing today. That's not going to happen. That's not being an effective counselor, and it's not providing quality services. So you're going to be looking back over, hopefully, the notes that you've been taking, the homeworks that you've been assigning to your mock clients, reflecting on those homework assignments, processing them, trying new things out. And I want you to let me know within that reflection paper, how you think you did. Be very critical of yourself. Tell me what areas for improvement you think you have going into the last video or recording, or even in the last recording. That's kind of the last time before a lot of you go on to practicum. So I want to hear from you and get a sense how you felt in the moment through those papers. That's why the reflections. And I want to be able to see a little bit more of those techniques coming out. So that's some feedback for everybody, I think, that applies to everybody. Overall, again, you all are doing really well. I'm seeing improvement. That's what I like to see. I'm going to continue to be a little bit more critical because we're nearing the end of the semester. A lot of you are going out into the real world and practicum next semester. And so this is my opportunity to provide you with that feedback so that you're prepared to do that. If I'm not doing my job as a gatekeeper and as an effective teacher, then I would be releasing you out into potential practicum experience without really having that as solid of a foundation and competence in using approaches as I could, and that would be me not doing my job, and I don't like that. So So let me see you doing your work. It doesn't have to be the best work. You're practicing. You're in a, your first year, and you're still practicing these techniques. And so it'll take time for them to feel natural, and to feel like they're integrated into the work that you're doing. And for a lot of you, you may not have even really selected your theoretical approach or the preferred theoretical approach that you're going to be using. And so it's understandable that it might not feel like an exact fit right now, but I want you to keep practicing, and I want to be able to see those techniques coming through in your role plays. So I think that just about does it for any kind of other feedback that I have for you guys. Discussion posts are going great. Again, I'm really enjoying getting in and reflecting with you and addressing some of those questions. That's where I wanted to go. A lot of you have had the similar questions as we go week to week, which I think are great, and I want you to keep asking those questions. As I kind of sat back and started to reflect on, the broader question of how do I become, a quote unquote REBT counselor, right? Whenever I graduate, or how do I become certified in EMDR? How long can I expect a session to last? How do I actually apply these approaches? These are fantastic questions, and I love that you're asking them, and I hope that I'm providing you with semi-decent answers to the questions. But as I started to sit back and reflect on my responses, the one thing I wanted to make sure to convey to you guys is that a lot of people do practice from different theoretical approaches without getting those additional letters at the end of their name. And that's okay. And I don't want you to feel like you can't do anything when you graduate because you don't have a certification in CBT. I don't want you to feel that way. There are a lot of people that, simply leave those, the MS at the end of their name, and then CRC if they're a rehab counselor, and that's completely fine. That doesn't mean that somebody is not an effective counselor, or they're not providing competent services, or adhering to a theoretical principle that would inform their practice. So a lot of the certifications are there for a reason, and those are for individuals that really feel like they need to have that additional training, that additional certification, or feel like they need to be putting out there that, yes, this is my orientation, and this is what I'm grounded in, and these are the techniques that I'm using. But there's also plenty of counselors out there that don't do that are still practicing effectively, that are still using approaches and still being able to convey to their clients through those initial intake discussions, through their professional disclosure, through a short bio on a website, that they use techniques that are informed by solution-focused counseling, or solution-focused theory, or cognitive behavioral theory, but they may not be certified. So, I don't want to make it seem like you have to always pursue an additional certification or training track post-graduation. A lot of people do, and there's reasons for doing that. But it's not something that you absolutely, in every circumstance, have to do. And if people are, especially if you're wanting to integrate different practices, then it may not really truly be necessary. With the caveat with all that being that certainly what you want to be doing is continuing to develop your competence and your ability to use skills within a theoretical approach. And that does come through pursuing continuing education and additional training, which is all part of what would be required of you whenever you get certified and licensed. And in order to practice, you got to be certified and licensed, right? So that's a way to build up your skills if you aren't interested in pursuing an actual certificate in something post-graduation. So I hope that offers a little bit more background into the scope of how do I continue to use these theories post-graduation. And again, everybody, when you get out of your master's program, it's not that you're going to go and get hired by an agency that's going to be expecting that you are just as knowledgeable and skilled and well-versed as somebody that's been a practicing clinician for like 15, 20 years. People are going to know that you're an office counselor. They're going to understand that. You're going to get the supervision that you need. And you're going to continue to build upon the foundation that we're trying to lay here for you in this program, which hopefully is a decent one. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that as we kind of move forward, because certainly, if we're looking at some of these other theoretical approaches, there's definitely going to be additional training and certification that people can get. There just is. You have to be careful when you search for things too, to make sure that it's all legit. You're not just paying $5,000 to a company for the sake of paying $5,000 to a company. Okay, so getting into this week's module and our topic in chapter 11 of choice theory, reality therapy. So this is one that's a little bit unique because reality therapy is kind of the skill, the techniques that are being used in a session, and it's all grounded within choice theory. And so there are some basic assumptions that go along with choice theory. And choice theory in general, it's more of a shorter term approach to counseling. I find a lot of, if we're looking at the basic human needs, I find it to parallel a lot of like what Maslow said in his hierarchy of needs, that if you, if you're not getting some of those basic needs met, then as a result, your behavior is going to reflect the absence of relationships or the absence of quality, a quality world, right? And part of choice theory is that, you'd think it would be a little bit more, developed than this, but that people have choices, that we all have a choice. We have a choice and decision that we can make when we are faced with external forces that are influencing whether or not our basic needs are being met. We have the choice to make changes in our lives. Choice theory, reality therapy has been used for a long time within the recovery community, and I think you could probably start seeing a lot of parallels between choice theory, reality therapy, and motivational interviewing to a certain degree as well. And so there's solution-focused brief therapy, which, again, you see a lot of parallels with that, with those two theoretical approaches too. So in terms of important key parts to choice theory and reality therapy, right? I like that there is a lot of structure within reality therapy, in that if you're looking at the WDEP system, and I've provided a pretty detailed infographic within this module that kind of outlines what that actually might look like. A counselor that is using that is grounded in choice theory and practicing reality therapy is approaching the counseling session more keeping the client in the present, right? So we're talking about the here and now, providing some psychoed around what reality therapy means, what it looks like. So that can be really useful, again, for people that have a limited amount of time with clients. And again, that kind of leads back to the question of how many sessions does anybody get with any of these theory whenever any of these theories are being used. When we're talking about reality therapy and some of these briefer interventions, we're really talking a brief here. We're talking like a handful of sessions with the client, which really isn't a lot. So the clinician, the counselor is really trying to implement some tools and practices within those counseling sessions, being a little bit more directive in that, while still allowing the client to choose their goals, of course, but providing a little bit more direction, and that's where the structure comes into play. And having these procedures in place, right, acknowledging this WDEP system where the counselor can always go back to the general question: what do you want to be and what do you want to be doing? What are you doing now? Where do you want to go? How's it working for you? Can you actually get to that end goal? And when you're working with a client, and I do always stress setting goals, right, as part of the overall counseling process, being able to set realistic and attainable goals with our clients is very important because it helps direct sessions and direct the work that we're doing. But it also allows us to continuously reflect back with our clients to see if somebody is actually making progress towards a previously developed goal. And that is especially true with choice theory and reality therapy. Excuse me. In terms of planning for change, the SAMIC, so if you're taking the research seminar class with me right now, this probably looks a lot like some of the objectives, the process of developing an objective that we're talking about in the research class. But when we're talking about goal development for clients, again, whether or not you're practicing from a choice theory perspective, you're still wanting to help guide a client towards goals that they can actually reach, right? That are reasonable goals, that are measurable, because even if we don't like managed care and health insurance companies, that's typically who we're reporting progress to. And so there is a need there for a goal to be measurable, to make sure that our client is actually working towards a goal and getting to where they hope that they want to be. And there has to be buy-in. So a client has to be part of the process of developing goals so that they're on board with it. And that's where the art, I think, of counseling comes into play. And within that is acknowledging when a goal may or may not be simple, whenever it may not be attainable, whenever it may not be realistic or measurable for a client. If a client comes to us and says, my goal is just to be happy, that is not measurable for us. And then really it's not simple either, right? I mean, we have to be able to dig deeper with our client and help them frame what that actually looks like in their real life, what that looks like in terms of behavior, what that looks like if we're thinking about reality therapy, in terms of their ability to be able to choose what's happening in their life, choose the behaviors, choose the actions, and be able to get some of those needs met and get to that quality world. And I think there are some limitations with reality therapy, and so I did provide some additional readings for you under the Multicultural and Social Justice Considerations for Reality Therapy folder, and using this framework in a culturally responsible manner. One of the bigger problems that I just kind of had always working with people with disabilities and reality therapy, like as much as I love the kind of the foundations of choice theory, and that, anybody is faced with any number of problems. And a lot of that kind of takes us back to, Adlerian theory, right? That we have all these, or existential theory, right? That we could be faced with a number of problems in our life that come from external forces. It's what we do with that that makes a difference. So I like that. Glasser really does not like the DSM. And so for somebody that was working in the rehab counseling world and vocational rehabilitation counseling that relied very much so on diagnoses and treatment plans, that was something that I could not put to the side and say, well, somebody that has bipolar disorder can change their behavior just like that through a 6-session meeting with me in reality therapy. So I think that there's been a little bit of a shift in acknowledgement in more recent years that, there's a place for, the diagnostic aspect of counseling and the treatment planning aspect of counseling. But I mean, Glasser is still alive and well and, takes a pretty strong stance against, limiting somebody to the diagnosis, which I agree with. I don't think we should limit our clients to a diagnosis, but I think that there are diagnoses for a reason, and use of medications is there for a reason and a purpose too. So I put some videos up that I hope you find useful. Like I said, they're relatively newer because Glasser's still, to my knowledge, alive. I don't think he has passed away. He also has other books out there. Again, if you're interested in choice theory and reality therapy and you're looking for additional guidance, and I've got the William Glasser International webpage up there, the Center for Reality Therapy. There are other resources out there. He's written a number of different books. One of the most interesting books I've read from him is one on positive addictions, which is really a unique book about replacing kind of quote unquote negative addiction with positive addiction. But again, it draws attention to how reality therapy has been used with in the substance use disorder population for quite some time. So with that, I will leave you guys to the discussion for the week, and I look forward to getting back in there and answering any questions you have.